Hafa and good afternoon to you and the people of Guam. Today is Wednesday, April 17, 2024. This oversight hearing on Guam Regional Transit Authority, GRTA, will be conducted by myself, Senator William A. Parkinson, Chairman of the Committee on Fire, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, Public Transit, Unemployment Insurance, and Universal Health Insurance. This hearing is called to order and the time is now 2:02. For the record and to comply with the open government law, notice of this hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and local media outlets on Tuesday, April 9, 2024, and the second notice was also shared to all senators and local media on Monday, April 15, 2024. Notice of this hearing was also posted and available on the Guam Legislature's website and the Government of Guam Public Notice Portal. This oversight hearing is a called upon GRTA to address the items on our agenda relative to the following: status of board and permanent executive manager search, vehicle maintenance and fleet status, ADA compliance, fixed route status, routes and on-time performance, federal grants, budget and classification of personnel status. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here today. Rules of conduct of this hearing: when you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and state your name and title for record-keeping purposes. Panel members are asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substantive nature of the agenda. Personal infringement as to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. Individuals who fail to abide by these rules will be restricted from participating and will be escorted and removed from the room. Before we proceed with your testimony, I will have my opening comments regarding this oversight. Today, we convene a long overdue oversight hearing on the status and functionality of the public transportation on Guam, specifically addressing the challenges faced by the Guam Regional Transit Authority. For years, GRTA has been emblematic of some of the most serious operational dysfunctions within our government agencies. Such dysfunction not only undermines the agency's mission, but also impacts every resident who relies on public transportation. A stark indicator of these challenges is the current composition of the GRTA's Board of Directors. They lack sufficient members to form a quorum. This deficiency jeopardizes the authority's ability to govern effectively and threatens the loss of $4.8 million in federal grants, as there is no board available to approve essential executive actions. The repercussions of these failures are felt deeply in our community. The inadequacy of our current transit services is a significant barrier for many of our citizens, particularly the unemployed, who cite transportation as their primary obstacle to securing employment. This is especially critical as we consider that 1/3 of our population relies on food stamps. Despite the abundance of job opportunities, they are unable to reach due to these transit issues. This agency's decline did not occur overnight, but is the result of years of mismanagement and chronic underfunding. Our public transit system has deteriorated to the point where it no longer meets the minimum needs of our community, let alone foster economic growth or improve the quality of people's lives, like it should. Therefore, we are at a crossroads. It is time for us to evaluate the viability of continuing to manage our transit affairs locally under the current framework, or to seriously consider other options, including privatization or seeking federal receivership. Such measures may seem drastic to some, but may be necessary to ensure that we provide reliable, efficient, and accessible transportation options for all of our residents. Today's hearing is not just an examination of what has gone wrong, it is an urgent call to action to rectify the current failures for the sake of our community's future. So we must come together to find robust solutions that will restore faith in our public transportation system and, more importantly, serve the needs of our people effectively. Thank you all for your attention, and let us proceed with the seriousness and urgency this matter requires. We will allow the agencies to first make their presentation, and then we will go through with each agenda item one at a time and ask questions related to each agenda item. First with the chair, and then any other senators present. Then the public will have the ability to address the committee with public comments after senators have questioned the agency. At this time, can we please have the GRTA panel introduce themselves?
Linda Ibanez, the acting GM.
Henry Leonguero, the Administrative Officer.
Thank you. And I'd also like to recognize a member of community, Evelyn Duenas. She was also a former chairwoman of the GRTA board. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for coming. So now we will hear discussions from those who have joined us today. I had said we would let GRTA speak first, so at this time we would like to have the Sergeant-at-Arms swear them in. Thank you.
Under penalty of perjury, do you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Chair, you're under oath. You may proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, before you proceed with your testimony, please state your name, title, or position for record-keeping purposes. Go ahead at your leisure.
Okay, Linda Ibanez, the acting GM for GRTA. I guess, are they doing the slides?
Henry Leonguero, Administrative Officer. We can start with the slideshow once it's presented, and then we'll go up.
Okay, our mission statement is to provide reliable, accessible, cost-efficient, effective public transportation service to the general public and individuals with disability on the territories of Guam. GRTA is to plan, establish, develop, coordinate, promote, own, operate service and facility that supports public transportation. We fulfilled the mandates on Public Law 30-05, the creation of GRTA as the autonomous agency of the government of Guam. The status of our board and permanent executive manager, the progress in the board composition and the search for a permanent executive manager is currently hindered due to the absence of a quorum of a board. As you can see right now, the chairman is vacant. We have vice chair and members on our board currently. And right now, there's 5 positions that are vacant. So right now, we don't have a quorum. There's a slight echo, so I have to. Okay. Is that fine?
Next slide, please.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. So that's consisting of our board. And like I said, on our previous is the chairman is vacant. We have vice chair and members, and there is 5 positions that are currently vacant. So that's the absence of the quorum for the board. In the selection of the executive manager is contingent upon the board approval. We have potential candidates. We have profiled them, but of course we're in need of that. We need a board quorum to make that recommendation. So also we have reached out to individuals that are interested in joining the board, And at this current time, no one seems to agree or accept the board nominations. And so far, we have one youth member that is interested, and we're looking at currently providing dialogue and see if they're still interested.
All right, slide for your consideration. Vehicle maintenance and fleet status. In January of this year, we submitted an invitation for bid for major repairs on the 19th and a blank purchase agreement January 30th for minor repairs for all vehicles in our fleet. The execution of these requests is currently pending with GSA. We remain in contact with GSA personnel while also acknowledging that they are short-staffed and are running into issues with the new system. We currently have 15 vehicles operational or near operational in our fleet. We have 4 vehicles down for maintenance as depicted. We are certain that once these contracts are awarded by GSA, these vehicles will be back in service. In addition, we are putting the finishing touches and finalizing our invitation for bid for the procurement of 5 buses, which we plan to submit to GSA in the effort to augment our fleet. All right, I'm going to talk the slide a bit. Let me orient to the slide. These are the vehicles graphically depicted currently on our routes. For the uninformed, it's important for you to understand the dichotomy between the routes. We got a fixed route is a line with designated spots. And paratransit is a transportation service we provide for individuals with disabilities. Key takeaway, sir, I want you to take away from this slide. In the effort to get healthy, we have 2 contracts at GSA. One, again, the major and minor repairs, IFB, and the second one is the BPA, or a blank purchase agreement, for minor repairs. We submitted those again in early January, and we are working with GSA with those contracts. And then we do have, again, in the effort to get healthy, IFB for 5 buses, which will be using federal funds with that, and the code is stated below. The blow up, we have 1 MV down, and we have 3 Eldorados down for maintenance with wear and tear, belts, etc. All right, next slide.
Okay, the American Disability Act compliance. GRT has addressed the ADA compliance, has initiated a comprehensive assessment and adjustment to ensure adherence to ADA regulations. We continue to engage with agencies like DISIT weekly and maintain active membership within the Guam Development Disability Council to implement the latest measure that promotes accessibility across our transit services. Just this past weekend, we conducted passenger assistance safety and sensitive training, certified all drivers and dispatchers in accordance with the Public Law 2919. Past training is considered to be industrial standards in assisting and caring for individuals with disability. In addition, DPW, we hired a new safety administrator to improve our safety and accessibility throughout GRT and DPW footprint. Hopefully he'll be on board by next month.
Slide, please. Fixed route status, routes, and on-time performance. GRTA continuously monitors and evaluates the performance of our routes to ensure efficient service to consumers. We maintain regular assessments of route schedules and on-time performance metrics to identify areas for improvement while also paying attention to customer feedback. The absence of a board hinders the proposed changes to current fixed route schedules that will benefit the consumers. Rest assured, we are committed to enhancing the reliability and punctuality of our fixed route services to meet the needs of our passengers. If you look at the slide real quick, overall ridership increased 4%, a slight decrease of paratransit services, and slight increase of our fixed route. So 2023, about 95,000 fixed route riders. I really don't like to do math in public, but 95,000 divided by 12, 8,000 divided by 30. Now we're talking about 270 to 300 riders per day. Paratransit, we have 454 active riders, and we average about 175 rides a day. Our paratransit on-time performance is currently at 92% in the AM and 83% PM. The national average at the macro level is about 90 to 92%. Our fixed route on-time performance is at 30%, 85% when using the standard 5-minute late window. The national average by region is 85 to 90%. Those are taken into account regional, small town Idaho, up to the greater New York metropolitan area, so it's an average. These metrics are provided by Route Match. In layman's terms, it's pretty much the transit Find My iPhone is how I like to explain that. Main cause of delay is traffic, with minimal delay caused by mechanical failure. Day to day, our drivers and dispatchers kind of analyze it. Perfect example is next week with Donkey opening. You sprinkle in a little JFK traffic, and you can kind of sit down and imagine the difficulty we will have meeting those fixed route times. Proposed changes to fixed route will improve on-time rate for consumers. Pending your questions, next slide. Federal grants, budget, and classification of personnel status. Federal grants, budget, and personnel classification status, it's important to note that approval for non-urbanized formula grants hinge on the board's approval of the Transportation Improvement Plan, or the TIP. Fortunately, the approval process has been delayed due to the ongoing challenge of forming a quorum. The agency is currently working with FTA to find some other means to approve the TIP, which will allow the federal grants to be awarded. FTA is also assisting the agency in reprogramming and consolidating unliquidated balance from previous grants to help fund operating assistance for this year. Key takeaway from this highlighted is the 3 grants below that would need the approval of the TIP prior to being awarded. Next slide. Classification of employees. We did a bulk classification in September of 2022, transferring 13 drivers from a limited term to a classified status. We attempted to classify more, but due to funding issues, we had to cap it at 13. We are working hand in hand with GCC's bootcamp to license drivers and earn gainful employment with the agency through a structured pipeline. We anticipate more drivers earning classified status once we are able to have a board. As you can look at the budget from 23 to 25, budget's somewhat linear. And in the top right, you'll see our employee status, 15 classified, 40 limited term, with a total of 55. Next slide. Pending questions.
Thank you for that presentation. So, I do got some questions. We will work our way down the agenda. So, the status of the board and permanent executive manager search. So, to clarify, ma'am, you are the interim executive manager, correct?
That's correct.
How long have you held that position?
I believe the middle part of December. So that's when I took over.
Okay,
as acting
so
capacity.
less than 6 months.
That's correct.
And you are also still Deputy Director of DPW, correct?
That's correct.
What steps have you taken in recruiting an executive manager currently?
So just recently, they put out an advertisement for searching potential candidates on our new circulation. So we received several candidates. We have profiled them with DOA. DOA has made the recommendations, but of course it's subject to board approval. And right now we don't have a quorum, and so that's our dilemma in proceeding to classify an executive manager. But there was a search, and it was advertised through media.
Okay, thank you. Before I continue, I'd like to just acknowledge my colleague, Senator Sabina Perez. Thank you for joining us. And I'd also like to recognize former GRTA board member, Ginger Porter. Thank you also for joining us. So to my next question, how is a permanent as opposed to interim executive manager chosen?
So there is qualifications made on the search, I guess, for the duties and responsibilities of a classified or unclassed executive manager. So there is some requirements. I don't have it off me, but I know it's transportation, planning, development, budgeting, and financial. So everything has been submitted down to DOA. They have provided the recommendations, but of course, like we said, we need the board's quorum.
And with only 2 members of the board is unable to make quorum and make policy decisions as an agency. Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
That's correct.
Have you spoken to the governor's office regarding appointments to the board in order to achieve quorum?
Yes, I have. So they have reached out. They have tried to get some board members on board. It's been unsuccessful. And the situation we're in is right now, there's no interest.
Could you elaborate on the challenges to finding someone willing to sit on the board? What it seems to be the roadblock or hesitation for people serving on the board?
Just recently, and I guess that's the reason why there's an acting, we had some situations with the AGs, and now we don't have legal guidance, and that's where we're at. GRTA is one of the agencies that doesn't have legal guidance or support.
And people are ambivalent to get involved with the board because of the legal issues surrounding it?
Pretty much, when we do our open dialogue and we reach out and do our conversation, that is the main discussion, is what is GRT's challenges, and it's legal guidance and the situation that GRTA is in.
So, if we can't fill the board to make quorum, then there is no board to approve an executive manager and make policy decisions for the agency. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it seems we're kind of at an impasse here. How do you propose we resolve this?
I wish I had all the answers, but I don't. But with the board situation, I think everyone has reached out to consensus, like what is the requirements and responsibility of the board. And unfortunately, because we are in a limbo with the AG's legal advice and support for the agencies, nobody wants to take that on. We have no practical legal guidance, no practical policy making decisions. With our federal partners, we also need their approval and work with instrumentally and implementing and partnership with our federal grantors with the approval of the board.
Okay. As a way to resolve this issue, should the legislature confirm a candidate for executive manager directly in lieu of the board? Would that be one possible way we could resolve this issue?
We can continue that discussion. I just need to look at the public law, if it's allowable, but we're open to discussion on that.
Okay. And so at this time, I'd like to invite my colleague to ask any questions regarding the status of the board and a permanent executive manager, and we will have another round of questions for the other agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for those questions. Those were some of the questions I wanted to ask. But can you also, acting executive manager, Abanez, what are some of the criteria for the board members? So I know there's 2 that are supposed to be nominated from the Mayor's Council. What were the other qualifications for the other members?
I don't have the criteria, but absolutely one is a youth member, and we've been actively engaged trying to get one. We've seen some interest, and we're pursuing that. That's one, and then obviously we were talking about some we don't know why people don't want to be part of the board. Obviously there's some dispersions that's been cast upon us unfairly, fairly, however you want to say it. But it is a consensus that right now the stove is too hot to touch.
Okay, so if you pull up section Article 2, right, it talks about board of directors, 7 directors. So 1 is a youth member. What about the other, so 4? What are the other qualifications? Is there any specific criteria?
I'm not aware, and I can do the research on the other specific criteria other than the 2 mayor's council members.
Okay. Is there one that needs to be an advocate of, for those that are disabled? Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay, and so the other 3, there's no specific qualifications for that one?
Not that I'm aware of, but I did overlook that one.
Okay, and Acting Administrator Ibanez, how many nominees were sent down for consideration and were rejected?
So when I took over in December, there was 1 potential candidate that had submitted in. So I forward down to DOA. That's as far as I know when I took over GRTA.
Just to clarify, DOA is unable to profile on the executive manager, so that board would actually do the profiling and then select the interim or the executive manager.
I'm sorry, come again?
Yeah, so DOA does not do, DOA can't profile an executive manager. It would be the board doing the profiling in terms of qualifications. Are they qualified to be looked at? And then the board in turn would also approve that executive manager.
So the board of directors has to come up with the potential candidates, is that what you're saying?
The board of directors would say that they are qualified and are profiled to be an executive manager, and then they conduct the interviews and then they select their executive manager.
Yeah, my question was board of directors, because that's what we need to ensure we have a quorum, right? Because that would then determine who the executive manager is. So for me, the first step is getting a full set or an operating set of board of directors. And so my questions were, to what extent were the board of directors, how active is that search? And I'm only hearing 1 in the past 6 months, or sorry, 4 months.
So for clarification, the board of directors, they have been seeking for members to be nominated for the board of directors. There has been discussion with several potential candidates, but they declined the offer as being one of the members of the board of directors. The different, for clarification, I think what Henry was talking about is the executive manager.
Correct.
But,
Yeah, I'm focused on the board of directors
yeah.
itself.
So, yes, there is
So I just want to
several-
see
yeah.
how active that search is.
Yeah.
And if we're only seeing 1, it seems to me we have to,
Yeah, so they
increase
did,
that
we
effort.
have reached out to several potential board members, but at the end of the discussion, they have declined to be a part of GRT Board of Directors.
Okay.
So there is some, we are reaching out to youth members, we are reaching out to members advocating disability, but as unfortunately, they declined being a member.
Okay, so I think this is an opportune time to, advertise these board of director positions. So according to law, so 4 additional candidates, so in addition to the mayor's council, 2 members of the mayor's council, of course, 5 directors shall be recommended to the governor, the names of at least 4 additional candidates for the board of directors, 2 who are representatives of mass transit riders. So anybody who's listening out there, if you're a mass transit rider and you want to be a part of this board, please, speak to the acting administrator or the governor's office, perhaps. And then the other, what the law says, 2 who are advocates for the rights of disabled passengers, Okay, so if anybody's listening out there, we're looking for 2 advocates for the rights of disabled passengers. And then it also says, one of the directors shall be a representative of senior citizens of Guam. So, this is an opportunity to, cast a wider net for those that are listening into this channel. So yeah, I feel like the efforts need to be increased, considering, this is such an important board to get GRTA operational, considering potentially there are federal grants on the line, and other things, to also be responsive to the riders of our community who really rely on this for, their livelihoods, getting to appointments, carrying on their day-to-day needs, right? So this is something that I feel needs to be really prioritized. Then the other thing the chair mentioned is that there is, I believe, another option in law. So if there is an ability to get candidates in the board of directors, I would have to look and see, but I believe the legislature can also do that as well. So I would like to work with the chair on this. I mean, of course, working with you to see if we can really, increase the efforts, because this is a really important board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I do have a follow-up question for you. The committee has not had a nominee sent to us since Janae Uggan, who was confirmed in February of 2023 last year. What happened to her?
I'll have to get back with you. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that question.
All right, and so now we'll move on to the second part of our agenda, vehicle maintenance and fleet status. Do you have any in-house maintenance and repair of your vehicles?
Yes, we have 2 automotive service workers who do routine maintenance, preventive maintenance on the vehicles.
And these gentlemen are part of your staff?
Absolutely.
For an agency whose primary responsibility is public transportation, do you think it would be more economically feasible to have more in-house mechanics for repairs and maintenance?
In the real world, right, the mechanical side, the pay scale is very low. And so all our fleet, right, is high technology. So with manpower and resources, right, it's difficult to recruit. And that's why we partner with boot camp to get us certified bus drivers, certified mechanics. And so we're working on that pathway. Of course, we need a shop, right? And so GRTA is in a situation, and I'm talking now for DPW, we house them, right? We provide that tenant government partnership for them to use that and to build their repairs, minor repairs. But of course, with major repairs, we seek contractors. And that's what Henry had said. We have put in a bid for preventive maintenance, major repairs, and we're working with GSA to get that bid out to address those issues that we are encountering, and we may encounter more if we don't address it quickly. Because we're just doing minor repairs, oil change, greasing our wheelchairs and all of that. But of course, we need a contractor that will do the major repairs.
And one of the reasons too is, these vehicles are specific. So, sometimes it comes with a Ford chassis with a Chevy engine. They're Frankensteins, they're put together. So they're not normal, typical vehicles that someone can usually work on, at least a layperson. So it would be feasible, but in terms of finding someone skilled enough to work on those specific vehicles, I believe recruitment will be low compared to other higher paying jobs.
How much do you spend on maintenance of vehicles?
Currently, we have about BPA for parts, which is capped at, I believe, 24,999, and then we have tires, 24,999. So roughly, right now, roughly about 50,000 just on tires, parts, fluids. For that maintenance contract we put in, we encumbered about 200,000.
Is that an adequate amount of maintenance?
No, but we do have the options to amend or adjust encumbrances later on. But with the budget we have right now, it allows us to establish an initial encumbrance and then do a budget mod or establish a encumbrance adjustment later on.
And how often do you need to replace vehicles?
So the average lifeline of any vehicle is 5 years. But because of the ridership has increased in traffic, in construction, the wear and tear on the vehicles, we would like to do that new replacement of buses every 5 years. So that's the situation we are. We're doing preventive maintenance to keep our fleet running currently. But right now, because we don't have a preventive maintenance, we see a lot of major repairs that need to be addressed.
Do you ever cannibalize parts from other vehicles in your fleet to repair or maintain vehicles?
Not that I know of right now. I don't believe they do that.
And how long did the last procurement take for buses? So if you need to replace them every 5 years, how long did the procurement take to get it done?
I don't have the exact time center, but we did receive the 10 buses January 2023, and it did take some time with protests and all that things to get those buses, but well over a year at least.
Did it take 2 years to get the buses?
I don't have the exact number on me.
Please get back to me on the procurement timeline, because if you got to replace a bus every 5 years, sooner with the wear and tear Guam Road puts on it, we got to look at these procurement timelines too to make sure we could replace things at a efficient clip.
Absolutely.
And what is the status of the major and minor repair contracts you submitted to GSA in January?
The status with GSA, they're currently working on it. We acknowledge they're short staff. Last word I got from the acting CPO is that they're preparing it and trying to cast it for bid. But as far as the actual status, I don't know.
So what have you guys been doing for repairs since January?
We have been working on for the main vehicles, we do have a vendor that's still under warranty. So that's been a big help. And then our automotive service mechanic has been doing the wear and tear on a lot of the vehicles.
How long is the warranty on these vehicles?
So when I came on board, I looked at the contract, and so I had a discussion with the current contractor about the warranty period. So what I understand, it's 3 years. So there was situations when the contractor did not have the parts readily available. So of course they have to extend the warranty until the parts come in. So once we had open discussion with them, they have been really supportive in providing us the parts and getting our buses equipped and repaired. The longest turnaround is probably a week, but they've been really responsive in getting those buses back online.
And how much time is left on those warranties?
So I understand it'll be the end of September, and so that's why we're engaging with GSA to please put us as a priority on the contract for the preventive maintenance and repairs. They're going through some challenges also, not only manpower, but because of this new financial management system we have, so it needs to migrate, but I think we're coming close to having a solution for that. But they are aware of our situation, GRTA's situation.
Okay. And do you have any outstanding debt in repair and maintenance contracts currently?
No, we're even with the House in that respect.
All right. At this time, I'd like to invite my colleague to ask and answer questions regarding this topic.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So initially, Ms. Ibanez, you were talking about that you're not doing preventive maintenance at this time. Is that correct?
No, so what it is, we're preventive maintenance, there's different, like oil change, changing a tire, air cons, freons, wipers, and stuff like that. So we're doing that internally, but like for major repairs, like if a blowout gasket, how do you say that, air con needs major repair, then we work with our contractors on that. We have small blanket purchase orders agreements, but of course it's going to exhaust, right? That's just a temporary fix until we get the overall contract for it. So that's where GRT is at.
Okay. And then the FMIS system, so what impact has that had on GRTA? Because I know there's a lot of glitches with the bringing it on board. What kind of impacts has GRTA experienced from that?
Well, at least with that, I believe with the GSA impact, it's stuck in the system. So meaning that the transfer as it migrated over, it didn't, because there was stuff in AS400 that was sent prior to the transfer, and I know that's been a big issue. Seeing budgets has been a big issue for GRTA. Kind of looking at, we have had training, and I know they're working on that. But for my foxhole, that's been the biggest issue I've seen.
Okay, so you don't know how much money you have? I mean, when you said you can't see the budget.
Well, not necessarily how much money we have, but we can't monitor daily how we could with AS400 and kind of see the payments being made by by DOA towards the vendors. That detail.
What about fares? I mean, is that, you can't see that either, the revenues that are being generated? Is that also being affected? The amount of revenues coming in? Because you're saying you can't see the vendor payments. So are you also not able to see the revenues coming in to really get a good gauge of what's available?
So typically they can see it. Right now it's just, how do you say, reconciliation, because it's not migrating. So we can estimate, but the true picture and the true value of it is not migrating. And so we're able to work with BBMR. They give us a projection and appropriation, and they see it. It's just, right now there's technical aspects and glitches that our ASO may not see and I may not see, but we can always dialogue with BBMR to get the true, accurate figure.
Okay, so they can still see it?
Yes.
And give you the real-time
Yes,
amount? Okay. All right, so then you're not in jeopardy of overspending at this point?
No, we're not. And we're making sure of that. As a certifying officer, we make sure that the funds are available.
Okay. And your fleet, you said, is 5 years, generally average lifespan. What percentage of the fleet you think is going to go through attrition? And then, so what is the replacement plan?
Well, we do have a bid in for we are preparing a bid for 5 buses, which we have funding for. Replacement plan, we did get 10 buses in January 2023. And right now,
Did you say 20 buses?
we had 10
10
buses
buses in
in
2020.
January 2023.
Okay.
And then I do owe the senator that procurement timeline for that. But as of now, we do not have a cyclic plan. That's something that a board could help us develop. But we do have funding and are in the works to make specifications for an IFB for 5 buses.
And sorry, how much do you need in the fleet to be, I guess, what's the ideal number? What is the bare minimum number that you need for an operational fleet?
About 30. 30 vehicles, ideally AM and a PM. Run one in the AM, comes back, like a Daytona, they do their fixes on it, and then that PM runs. Right now, they are actually running from 5 to 10.
Okay, so you
10
want, so 30 each shift, or
No, I'm sorry, 30 vehicles total, so we
total?
can have
So
15
each, okay, gotcha. And do you have like the age characteristics of your fleet? Like what percentage is about to, in need of replacement that you predict?
We can get that number for you.
Okay.
I'll confirm.
Thank you. The other question I had, I know electric buses. There was an opportunity to get electric buses, and I just wanted to see what is the status, or what is the goal going forward to going through electrification, I guess.
Okay, so right now we're chasing some grants for electrical school bus. We have one currently in place, and that's for DPW, but I'm having our team see if we can work with BSP, Bureau of Statistics, to get a grant. Unfortunately, we're on protest again, but yes, we are chasing grants to look into electrical buses for GRTA also.
Okay, that's great, because we just came from the CIS conference, and I know there's a big push for electrification. And have you talked to GPA about plans, maybe to integrate with their goals and plans?
Yes, we have. So we have partners with GPA. They're helping us on the charging station and, of course, infrastructure on the charging station and how do you say that, the mileage and volume of the electric school buses. But yes, we are with GPA.
Okay, great. All right, I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you for this part of the agenda. This is Masi.
All right, at this time we'll move on to the ADA compliance section of the oversight hearing. And so just right off the bat, I just want to ask, is your office space ADA compliant?
So, DPW has housed several agencies, right? So GRTA is one of them, and so it was a priority to bring in a safety administrator to make sure we're in compliance with ADA, but not only ADA, building codes, right? So we are ecstatic, me and Vince, about putting on a safety administrator to address our deficiencies in the department. So yes, we're looking forward to improving our workspace for ADA and building codes to make sure that we are in compliance.
So what is your process for complaints regarding ADA compliance? And how do you address those concerns? And how do you track your resolution process?
For complaints in general, it would go through whoever. Normally, it goes through the drivers or something at that at that first level. Then it gets filtered up to include incident reports or statements, and then it's packaged for the executive manager to action. And we do file it away. As far as as action, I would have to divert to our program manager, who's not here today, in terms of what they do after that.
Do you audit for staff compliance to PASS standards? That's passenger assistance service and sensitivity?
I'm sorry, just can you repeat it one more time, Senator?
Passenger assistance service and sensitivity, PASS?
Absolutely, which is the past the standard recognizing caring for and servicing individuals with disabilities. Just past weekend, we completed 28 drivers who completed it with, I believe, GCC's Continuing Education Work Development Program, and that makes us 100%, at least with the drivers and dispatchers, in terms of completing that PASS certification, which is an annual requirement.
And so what metrics do you use to determine compliance to PASS standards?
I don't have the requirements on me.
I'll get back to you on that. I need to talk to our special projects coordinator that is assigned to that. There is requirements and disciplines that the drivers need to know. They go through this whole training and then they get certified. But I'll get back to you on the requirements.
Yeah, because I understand going through the classes and getting the checks in the box, but it's also important to understand, you know, the metrics you use to judge, like, is this training actively, effectively taking hold? Are they using their training in a compliant manner?
That's correct. I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. As the primary mode of transportation for many individuals with disabilities, GRTA plays a critical role in the livelihood of these people. DISID has reported to us that one of the primary challenges for people with disabilities continues to be transportation, especially as individuals with disabilities reach adulthood. A child with disabilities has federally mandated support groups available through schools. But when they reach adulthood, public transportation plays a critical role in that individual's ability to live their lives productively and with some dignity. Do you think GRTA provides sufficient transportation services for our individuals with disabilities?
Yes, I do. We do provide the best method to provide that service. We are working on getting our drivers certified, experience, and be compassionate, right? So, yes, they are aware of disability, and we provide that support.
Do you monitor your on-time performance with paratransit riders?
Yes.
Have you been able to accommodate all requests for paratransit rides?
Yes, there may be some rescheduling on it. There may be some delays, but I believe GRTA team has done their best to try to schedule our clients to make sure that they are provided that transportation.
If you could give me just a rough ballpark, what percentage of requests do you think you'll be able to accommodate generally?
Well, right now we have 175 rider cap per day, so that's the max before the rubber band breaks.
Okay, and are you hitting that number consistently every day?
Yes, we are, and you know, obviously there's those ones and twosies where we'll add on to try, and you got to understand we do service the island. We're very intimate with these passengers. We know, I know like 5 people's phone numbers just because they call. So we have a very intimate relationship with them, and we do work with them and understand that you know, sometimes they have to reschedule. So that's the kind of working relationship we have with them.
So you said it was about 175 rides before the rubber band breaks. How high would we need to get the capacity to accommodate all the riders and not have the rubber band break?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
You said we had like a max daily rider capacity of 175 people. Did I understand that correctly? Before
Yes.
the system kind of breaks down a little bit.
Yes.
How much would we have to raise that capacity to be able to accommodate all the paratransit rider without the system breaking down?
Well, it's also, so 175 is the cap of the vehicles we have. Now, I don't have to buy a number of how many rides we can add if we were to add a vehicle, but also, it's kind of racked and stacked the priority, first calls, rescheduling. So there is a process for them to request a ride, and obviously we prioritize critical care as opposed to kind of certain errands.
Do you have sufficient vehicles, drivers, and customer service staff to accommodate all the demand for paratransit riders? Because you said, like, with a couple days, you put a little bit extra and you're able to accommodate. With your setup as is, are you able to accommodate all the paratransit riders that would like to avail?
Yes, we are. And then again, to include what they need to do. So it's not like 175 people and down. They schedule. So if someone needs to go to the ATM at 176, it's a little bit different than if it was a renal care or something. So those are the kind of decisions that we make.
And what federal guidelines or mandates do you adhere to or follow regarding paratransit rides?
I'll get back to you on that. We don't have it with me. I don't have it with me, but I'll get back to you on it.
Okay, the Department of Transportation's ADA Regulation 49 CFR subsection 37.129A provides that, with the exception of certain situations in which on-call bus service or feeder paratransit service is appropriate, complimentary paratransit service for ADA paratransit eligible persons shall be origin to destination service. Have you provided consistent origin to destination service for paratransit riders?
Yes.
Do you track complaints regarding failure to comply with this law?
Yes, we do. We have a software. It's called Route Match. It records pretty much the driver's activities, the scheduling, if there's any delays. They're able to track everything when they are en route or off route, or their passenger capacity. If there's a passenger complaint, they're able to use that and make that report into our customer call center, correct? Is that what they call them? Yeah. So we're able to do that.
Just as a ballpark, what are your average complaints per year? Like number of complaints per year in that regard?
I don't have that, and mainly because a lot of the complaints are, I wouldn't say tongue-in-cheek, but they're not formal complaints. They make them to the drivers, they bring it up. There are not that many formal complaints coming through the pipeline, via an official, but there are those kind of tidbits, and then it's also, kind of recognized that 95,000 rides last year for a fixed route, 45,000, 140,000 rides per year. Statistically, that's going to be complaints, and we try to minimize that while kind of underwriting the risks while addressing them.
The Department of Transportation's ADA paratransit regulations at 49 CFR Part 37, Subpart F, Section 37.131B require ADA paratransit operators to provide next-day trip scheduling during normal business hours. Have you provided consistent next-day trip scheduling for paratransit passengers consistent with federal law?
Yes.
All right. And do you track complaints regarding failure to comply with this law?
Yes.
And is it a similar situation? Do you have very few official complaints?
Absolutely.
Okay. Section 31.131F of the ADA paratransit regulations prohibits limiting the availability of paratransit service to ADA paratransit eligible individuals by any operational pattern or practice that significantly limits the availability of service to ADA paratransit eligible persons. Examples of such operational patterns or practices include substantial numbers of significantly untimely pickups, early or late, trip denials, including trips that cannot be scheduled within 1 hour of the requested pickup time, as discussed later under negotiating trip times, missed trips, and trips with excessive trip lengths. I mention these because these are specific metrics under ADA regulations. So, do you know how many significantly untimely pickups you had last quarter?
We can get that number through route match, but there is delays. As you know, there's traffic. There's abundancy of cars, and we have double session, we have constructions all on our routed roads. There is delays. I'm not going to deny that. Our drivers have been calling it in that they are delayed on a route for pickup or drop-off. So, yes, there are delays. For the scheduling of same day, I believe the CSRs, our dispatchers, have been trying to accommodate the same day appointments. Sometimes it's very hard to address that, especially if it's out of the norm on their schedule, but they do try to accommodate the same day appointments.
All right, let's make sure you could get that number to
Yes,
this
I will.
committee. Do you know how many trip denials you've had last quarter?
I know that there were several discussions on that. The team did mention to me on that, and there was times when they would have to deny, and it's because of mechanical issues or aircon issues. One of the major problems with GRTA was aircons. It's just one of those days that our aircons are down, and so that's one of the reasons why they had to reschedule or stuff. But it's very minimum, but we had the discussion that please work around the scheduling of our clients.
Okay, so let's also make sure we get that number, because I'm curious how many trip denials that we've had because of mechanical failures. That's be important for us to know. Do you know how many trips you've just missed last quarter?
We can get that from our route match.
Please do so.
Yeah.
And do you know how many trips with excessive trip lengths you had last quarter?
I can get that number also.
Okay.
We'll send it to you.
And you said you could do all of these things through route match?
Yeah, so there's a system that they use, GRTA, with the drivers. There's a coordination of that. I'm sure they can get that. We have that software, and we also have the consultants that can help us get those numbers for us.
Okay, so these questions I've asked that you're going to look up the answer for, they're all very specific metrics under ADA regulations. So we should definitely have those numbers handy for quick reference.
Okay, we will do.
And At this time, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Senator Sabina Paris, to ask any questions regarding ADA and ADA compliance.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple questions, but is it possible for Evelyn to
We're
ask
gonna
questions as
let
well?
GRTA go through all the
Oh.
questions, and afterwards
Okay.
we'll let the public have an opportunity to
Okay.
ask questions and
Okay.
give testimony as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I heard earlier, Mr. Guerrero, right? Is that your name?
Leon Guerrero.
Leon Guerrero, sorry. Yeah, one of the questions that the chair asked is, so do you get complaints from riders in regards to those with disabilities? And I heard you say that you get it, but you file it away, and you don't know the outcome of it.
After they've been executed, arbitrated, we do file them away. I apologize if I miscommunicated that.
Okay, so you do follow through with it, these complaints?
Yes.
Okay. And so there's some things that happened in the past. So these came up through an audit, I guess the public auditor, as well as I think there was a citizen-centric report. So in 2022 article, there were constituent complaints where drop-offs to the ITC building were not ADA compliant, and in one case, a wheelchair-bound person tilted and fell over, resulting into hospitalization. And so have you addressed this issue with the bus shelters and drop-off points in regards to ADA compliance?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that, but we'll look into it once I get back, and then I'll provide you the information.
Okay, thank you. And then also in an article published in 2018, a rider was hospitalized at GMH due to carbon monoxide poisoning after riding a GRTA bus. Are you aware of this, and what is being done, or what has been done, to your knowledge?
I'm not aware of that, but let me get back to the team. I know that we don't have that issue with our current bus fleet, but I will get back to you on the 2018 incident.
And regarding to complaints, what is the turnaround time in responding to those, adjudicating, basically investigating, and then corrective action? What is the turnaround time to get that corrected?
Okay, so we have individual that receives the complaints, and then he would do all his complaints. He would go out in the field, do his interview, speak to the complaint and the person that is being, all these people that they need to talk to. So he would come back, address it, put in an incident report, then he'll talk to the staff. Once he reaches that, he would put all his report in, then it's sent in to me. And then we will look into it, and then we'll do corrective actions, correcting measures, or disciplining actions. So there is an individual that addresses those.
And do you have a record of that as far as complaints and corrective actions? Have you been able to take a look and see what the data shows?
Yes, so recently I implemented that, but I can provide you what I have currently. And then if the staff has previous, then we'll provide the numbers to you. But on my intern, I only have 2, and they're just verbal complaints, but we do address it through written documentation and communication with the clients.
And to your recollection, what is the turnaround time to get that resolved?
It's not that long under my tenure. Usually it takes like 3 or 4 days. The team is very aggressive in addressing those concerns and complaints.
Okay, thank you. And then in regard to the boot camp, right, that you were talking about earlier, was it a boot camp for drivers? Did that include the recertification for passenger assistance safety and sensitivity? Is that incorporated into the boot camp itself, or is that a standalone type of certification?
So the boot camp, we had partnership with GCC and DPW we initiated, and then we included GRTA. Not with the PASS initiative in the boot camp, but I believe that they're working on, yes, it's GCC, but it's not a how do you say it, a requirement from GRT and DPW, but it is a requirement for GRTA, and it is with GCC.
And so this is an annual recertification. So when was the last time the employees were certified?
So just last weekend,
Last weekend,
they were
okay.
able to go through that certification.
Prior to that, I believe also was August, and then the planning for this last this last weekend started in January of this year.
Okay. And do you evaluate the effectiveness of the certification? So is there a way for you to check to validate that the certification is effective?
Yes, we can. I believe we have, I'm trying to implement a 3-month performance standard on the certification and based on the driving and the past training. So yes, I would like to implement that on evaluation to our drivers.
Okay, great. And what would that performance standard, what are you testing for?
So the requirements as of past, there's CPR, there's handling disability, complaints during the write-off, drop-offs, and stuff like that. So once we have all of the criteria on the performance standard, then we'll implement that within the 3 months after they receive the training.
Okay.
So there's a follow-up on our drivers.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And so we'll go on to ask questions regarding the fixed route status, routes, and on-time performance. So the fixed route system is comprised of the gray line, the green line, the orange line, the blue line, the red line, and the Blue Line Express. For a time, the orange line was down, and we received concerns from riders who were not able to make it to work because this bus line was down, jeopardizing their livelihood. So I gotta ask, why was the orange line down? And what did you do to mitigate the effect it would have on the livelihood of riders who depend on public transportation?
At that time, there were I believe a few air conditioners that were down, so we had to flex some vehicles over to our paratransit to help mitigate that. There was a kind of redundant line, I believe red line, that will kind of help that area, acknowledging that it will be harder on the rider. But that was our plan to mitigate it while we got those vehicles back into operation.
Can you describe in greater detail the proposed changes to the fixed route schedule that require board approval?
One will be the elimination of the Southern Shuttle, which goes from, I believe, Talafofo down to Umatic. What we would like to do would be to kind of partition and have Blue Line 2 cover Inarahan and Gray Line cover from Inarahan all the way up through Agate and to Agania Pool, and then Green Line covered from Talafofo down to Agania Pool. So essentially bisect that area and then eliminate the Southern Shuttle, still being able to service that part that Southern Shuttle would use, as they are a very underutilized service.
You stated in your presentation that the fixed routes on-time performance is 30%, while the national average is 85 to 90%. When someone misses the bus to get to work because of a lack of a reliable on-time performance, how long does it typically take for the next time that bus comes around at that stop?
So for the route match, it covers literally on the dot on time. The national standard's about 5 minutes past the pickup time would count as on time. So that kind of bumps it up to about 85% is what people usually use that to include route match counts early as not on time. So if the bus was to, like on a Saturday, get there early, it wouldn't be on time, if that makes any sense. But what if they would miss that, then there's a fixed route schedule that they would have to adhere to. Usually about an hour later, another bus will come if they miss that bus.
So, what are ways we could help legislatively to improve that on-time performance, if at all possible? Because, I've heard stories from constituents where, they're trying to turn their lives around, trying to get straight, getting themselves a job, and because of the line being down, they would have to avail themselves of a cab to try and get to work. But the line was down for so long that became unsustainable for them. They couldn't afford to go that route anymore. And so, these stories I hear from people deeply affected by these lack of routes really bug me, because these are people trying to do it the right way, and we are letting them down in terms of assisting them in getting there. And so, whatever we can do to improve that 30% on-time performance to get it closer to the national average, we are certainly open to suggestion on how to help and facilitate that. So at this time, I'd like to open up the floor to questions from my colleague, Senator Sabina Powers, regarding the fixed route status, routes, and on-time performance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what determines the bus routes, pickups and drop-offs?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so how do you determine the bus routes, the pickups and the drop-offs? So what makes you decide a location is a pickup and drop-off point, and the routes that you take? What were the factors that made you decide that?
Well, right now, the schedule was predetermined prior to us, but it was approved by the board. But I'm not aware of how they chose those spots.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a grid location on those locations. It's probably a volume of usage, a volume of traffic studies on it. So I can get that information on the locations, why it was subject for that approval for bus routes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories too about even with the bus, the pickup points, one of the bus drivers just drove right past it and there was somebody waiting. I think and that was the last bus. Have you heard any of that complaint being made? And I mean, I think that's, considering that, probably the frequency. So what is the frequency of pickups from these bus stops?
Well, we do have a system, again, route match, which, if we do get a complaint like that, we are able to go back into the software and see if that driver did make the stop, or, if he's even near the stop. So more often than not, that driver has had a stop, made that stop, and it's logged down. But as far as how many complaints we have had about that, I don't have it.
Yeah, I think, it did happen. So I think this is something that needs to be investigated, as far as, our community relies upon this. And so this person was stranded. And yeah, that was, one account, who knows how many are out there. And so this is important when you're determining the pickup points and drop-offs, that it is adhered to, and to make sure that the drivers really make sure they stop. Even if they think there's nobody there, there might be sitting down and, not very obvious. The person may be also tired from waiting and, not aware the bus is coming. So really, the bus drivers really need to be more sensitive to the patrons. And also, I guess the fact that there's no, you don't have an answer as to how were these routes were determined. I do appreciate your effort. I know you're new at this position. But I think, really to respond to the needs of our community, we really need to be on top of this and prioritize this, the information so that we can do better, improve the services. When you talk about our community, not, for instance, there are many businesses that don't even have enough workers because perhaps this is one of the reasons is that there's not a reliable transportation. And so it's a cascading effect. Now these people in our community don't have a way to make a living. So it's really, this utility is such an important utility for our island. And we really need to sharpen up the GRTA, whatever state it is in now. We need to really ramp up the improvements of this. So are you aware of any efforts to establish a strategic plan to address community needs?
Well, I'm currently working with several of my colleagues, right, to address and to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of transportation. I'm also working with GRT personnel to chase after grants to improve our software, providing adequate busing to classify and make sure that our drivers are aware and require all those training that needs to address with disabilities. So there is a lot of moving parts that I would like to address. And of course, right now, the situation is we're able to work with our federal grantors to provide over the carryovers of our funding. But of course, we need the board's approval and guidance on that. So we can implement all these things and they're good dialogues with our team. It's just that I need a board to approve all those recommendations so we can execute and move forward to improve our transportation system.
So as far as bus shelters, are you aware that there are certain restrictions on any type of advertisements, for instance, tobacco advertisements? Are you making sure that your bus shelters are in compliance with these federal laws?
Yes, that's correct. And also, I also asked our team to look at, how we advertise on our school, not school bus, I'm sorry, GRT buses, to promote awareness, tobacco, usage of drugs, drug-free programs, alcohol. So they're working on that to promote that advertisement on it.
How often do you evaluate the bus routes?
So I recently asked one of our bus drivers, our transportation supervisors, to take me on a ride to see all our routes, right, our fixed routes and everything. So I haven't done that, but I would like to do that so I can get a picture of what really needs to be done and what's going on, so we can evaluate to improve or to expand our horizons on the routes.
And what are the opportunities to offer free rides for low-income workers?
So at one point in time, I understand that they provided that, but I would have to go back again and see what was the reason why we continue not to do it. But I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. And as far as Smart Pay, are you looking towards digital transactions or rider subscriptions?
Absolutely. We're that help automize everything. We are looking into it, but right now we're just trying to get back on the fairway.
Okay, and what about rider sharing or share riding? So for instance, to help augment the GRTAs, there are like innovative ideas that you guys have to make sure that, there's a greater frequency of pickups, combining it with, let's say, more of a local type of transportation so that you can do the heavy lifting from transporting patrons from those areas and just do a quicker, increase the frequency of pickups? I mean, have you looked at innovative ways to increase frequency of pickups?
Not at this time, but we'll look into it.
Okay, and are you aware of any best practices that other jurisdictions have in regards to improving their transit system?
Well, I have been doing some research on it, and yes, I would like to look into that.
Okay, and then in regards to customer satisfaction, do you track that? And how do you do that?
Not at this time. We haven't been tracking that, but I'm sure we can implement something within our call center.
Are routes tied to communities seeking work and businesses seeking employees?
Can you just re-clarify the question again? Sorry, one more time.
So, for instance, like in some jurisdictions, they have express type of services. So to cater to workers, right? Going to work. So do you have any routes tied to communities seeking work and businesses seeking employees? So has there been any businesses that actually reached out to you and said, okay, we need workers. Can you perhaps cater a particular service to transport workers to our business?
Not at this time.
Okay, and are you going to do that? Is this something on your list to do?
Absolutely, but like I said, we're trying to increase our fleet, our manpower, and our resources. Once we have a stable fleet and manpower, I'm definitely would look into it.
Can you do both at the same time?
Sure.
Yeah, because sometimes maybe you may not have to purchase so much because you've tailored it so well that you may not need to spend more money and resources. But I see that there is definitely a need for more fleet, but perhaps there's a way to customize it and streamline it more. But yeah, I thank you for your responses. Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
We're just going to stand by for a moment to check the video feed. I was just informed we weren't on live, so I just want to make sure we're not having any technical difficulties right now. All right. We're good to go there. So we'll go through this last section of questions, and then we will open up the floor for some public commentary. This section is on federal grants, budget, and classification of personnel status. So help me understand this chart on federal grants. You've been awarded $18.3 million in federal grants, and your end balance of about $15.9 million. So I just wanted to be clear, the $15.9 million is how much you have unspent?
Yes.
It looks like the bulk of that expires at the end of fiscal year 2026 with some of it expiring in 2025 and another in 2024. What is the holdup in using that money for its intended purpose?
Well, for operating assistance, the past 2 years, they've been using the ARP and CRISA to help fund. The model that we've had right now of taking full operations has only been in existence for about 2 years. And within those 2 years, we haven't had a board for, we've only had a board for about a quarter of them. Now, certain of the big ticket items are the buses, that 1 million, which we're going to use for the 5 buses we're going to procure, and then the Dedido Park and Ride, which is about 10 million. So that Park and Ride has run into a few hiccups, but those are the big bulk of the funds unspent. Now the 830,000 of operating assistance, that's going to help carry us through the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. So how can the legislature help you to use that money for its intended purpose?
Okay, so the Dedido Park and Ride, that's a federal grant. So we're working with land management. There is some issues on land acquisitions, right? So we have actually worked on land management because there's a parcel that we need to address in that area. And if it's not sustainable, we're looking at the other side to address. So that's where we're at on that. It's a land acquisition. Technically, it's not all of GRTA's asset. It's shared with Dedido mayors. And so, of course, the mayor's council has a say on that. So we're working with land management to address that on the Park and Ride. And then the other grants, these are continuous grants. So we are in the process of addressing it with procurement, which is the 1 million buses, right? Correct. So they're all in procurement phase. The other ticket item is, I believe they're trying to build a facility, GRTA facility that includes housing for their buses and everything, and that's adjacent to DPW. We're still working with land management on a sliver of property, and once we address that, then we can go out for bid. I believe they have a design in place already for that. It's just the construction of it now, and it's just a land acquisition that we need to address.
Okay. There are $4,866,394 in grants ready for FTA review, awaiting board approval. Some of which have been waiting for approval since 2022. Without a board, it appears to me we would simply just lose out on that money. Am I correct?
Partially. So the way Ryan Fuji from FTA has done it, it's a lot of the lapsing grants. He's been approving them and kind of rack and stacking them, working his way down. So these grants were sent in a while ago, but he was prioritizing the grants that were about to lapse, and now we're trying to extend these grants to use them. But yes, a board would definitely help with the approval of the grants to help with, basically with our long-term goals, and this is what that money is applied for.
So, just to be clear, if you had board approval, you would be able to fully use those funds for their intended purpose?
Absolutely.
There are currently 55 employees with GRTA in 2024. 15 classified and 40 limited term. The Enabling Act of Guam Regional Transit Authority envisions a classified service of merit-based professionals. If that is what the goal is, why do we continue to have a majority of our employees be limited term employees?
So what I understand is that they are picked up as limited term appointment, but the classification for a license, I think, is required at D. So, and this is similar to DPW, but we were able to partner with GCC to get them to get their license, to train during their course, and they learn the routes, right? So by the time they get all their discipline and classification, we would like to classify them, and we would go through the merit system. But of course, the budget forecast, right? If we don't have the funding available, we cannot move forward in classifying these individuals. So I believe the LTAs were used under the ARP funding, and so now we're looking into our appropriation, and so we are trying to classify these current LTA positions. But of course, we're working on the carryover with our federal partners, and once the board approves that, then of course we have sufficient funding to classify these employees.
Can you give me a ballpark timeline of what you would think it would take to get a majority of the employees of GRTA from limited term appointments to fully classified? How long would an undertaking of that take?
Well, if funding is available, appropriation is there. Of course, there is a continuous announcement as a school bus driver. So once we are able to secure the funding, GG1s are executed, and there is an eligible listing, it should be a turnaround within 3 months, depending on drug testing and all the other requirements that DOA requires. So it's just executing the funding source.
Yeah, I know you folks have to do your best with a very limited budget. I was trying to research other jurisdictions who have similar measurables to Guam. And the one I was looking at was the Maui Public Transportation System. They are another island public transit serving a similar population as Guam. And they have an operating budget of $39 million. You are appropriated $2.7 million. I do not think that that is sufficient appropriations to fulfill the need for public transportation. I see this as almost as an insurmountable math problem that we can't solve with legislation. We have to put money into the system if we want it to work. And so in the interim, as we try to close the gap between your $2.7 million worth of funding and the $39 million we're seeing in other jurisdictions to provide the bare minimum service, you could see that there's a little bit of a delta that we need to close. So, I don't think it's a sufficient amount, but I'd like to hear your perspective. Do you think you have the sufficient appropriations to fulfill the need for public transportation on Guam?
No, we don't. Obviously, that delta is big. Right now, to fund locally our entire operations, we would need about 1.5 million more. Now, we can never anticipate the awarding of grants, and we would have to, ask for the local funds to come in since we can't anticipate the grants. With the possibility to JV it back, if you're not familiar with the mechanisms of applying salaries to people, BBMR, when you onboard a GG1, they need a salary applied, and we can't match that with federal grants. So if we did have the local funding, we would be able to classify a lot more people just because we have that set funding for that staff. Again, this model is about 2 years old and still working out the kinks.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up questions to my colleagues. Senator Sabina Perez, please go ahead, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. To your knowledge, what is the amount of non-appropriate fund balance? Do you have an amount that's available at this time? There's no public record now.
I don't have the amount, but I'll get that to you.
Do you have a ballpark figure?
It's roughly around 90,000.
90,000, okay. And this is a monthly amount, 90,000 of non-appropriated funds?
I'm sorry, that's the balance.
The balance, okay. Okay, as far as, so I want to go back to your slide, and talking about the Dedio Park and Ride, and you mentioned that roughly 9.5 million is for land acquisition. If you were to find government land, would you be able to reprogram this money for other purposes?
I would have to check on the grant requirements, but I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, because I believe there is land that government has control that, rather than spend the 9.5 million on purchasing land, it could be used towards the operations, for instance.
Yeah, I don't think it's only the land, it's the construction, and I believe they want to build shelters and park and ride stuff. So I can get back to you on that information.
Okay, and then in regards to the other line items, can you just go down through each line item and explain what the money's for? And I see the expiration date is varying expiration dates, some as soon as September of this year. Can you explain, especially the one, the ARP funds, what is planned for that money? If you can restate what that's for.
Okay, well, in regards to the ARP, that's what we're using right now to help fund the salaries that are not covered by the local budget. To include, we are working with FTA to get that 830,000 to apply to salaries, and those two amounts will carry us to the end of the fiscal year. In terms of the first one, the Cocoa Bird AIM, that's our grant. Yeah, in terms of the Cocoa Bird AIM grant, that's our grant to try to bridge the gap through the south, all the way up to around the Deredo Mall, almost kind of like a Uber from the south to the north, and that's where that money is applied to.
Okay, and then how often is that used, and when is that service available?
That's in the works. Right now we have our special project coordinator working with that grant. There's been a bit of an issue in terms of gathering the statistics, working with VOG to gather statistics on the usage rate. But right now that is not in service. It's still in the implementation phase.
So when you talk about Uber, are you talking about the fleet itself, or are you actually contracting it out?
We would be using our fleet. We have 5 buses that are part of that grant that we would have to procure, and essentially it's an on-call from through the village of the south. I don't have specifics, and I wouldn't want to speak on that, but it's pretty much like I hate to use the word Uber, but it's meant to help bridge the gap from the south to the north with on-demand.
Okay, so these would be pre-programmed, so let's say somebody scheduled it in advance, or would it be, you said it's on demand?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, and would this be tied to like a smart type of scheduling, or how would this work, this particular grant or program?
I don't have the specifics on the automation part of that grant.
Okay, how about the next item? It says CRRSA 5311.
Oh,
What
that's
is that?
that's the Carissa through the non-urbanized grant, and that would be operating assistance, and that number is going to help us get through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so it's paying for operational expenses?
Operational salaries.
Salaries, okay. And what does Carissa stand for?
It's I don't have the acronym on top of it. It's the CARE, no, not CARES. Con- no, it's a subsidiary of CARE. I don't have the acronym on top of my head.
Okay, so this is a 5-year grant. It seems like half has been spent, or a little less than half. It seems like the rate of expenditure does not match, I guess, the years. If you were to amortize it out equally, you know, a lot of it probably was, or I guess it's kind of like ballooning out the expenditures, it seems, because of the previous years, or let me just take a look at this. Yeah, I just need to maybe run the numbers to see if this is being utilized effectively. Do you get a, what do you, how is this program, or are you using this pretty evenly throughout the years?
Well, that was, we are kind of using it evenly. So there's a different budget within that grant. Operating assistance is part of it, to include admin state funding. I don't have the grant in front of me, but what is left is at 830,000. As far as what was spent before that, I don't have that now.
Yeah, it seems to me a lot of the money is unspent. So considering it was a multi-year grant, it probably should have been spent more evenly rather than it being ballooned out at the very tail end. So I'm wondering if this is a procurement issue, and what are you doing to address that?
Sorry, you're wondering if it was a procurement issue as to not being spent?
Right, because, you know, part of what you're saying to me is that it's paying salaries. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
But when you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem to match, because I would think your employees are pretty stable, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're stable, but the operation cost also includes night differential overtime, because they work from 5 a.m., I believe, and then 10 p.m. So there's 2 shifts. So it augments. Sometimes we have overtime to cover in case there's a mechanical issue, to assist the driver to make sure that they pick up the client. So there's a lot of augment going on. And then I believe on the operational side is for, I'm sorry, I have a sore throat. Operational is for like, procurement, like tires, parts, minor repairs. So there is small purchases made for basically operation needs. So yes,
Yeah,
they're
and-
tied into procurement.
And also COVID, so
Yes.
a bunch of these years probably was not
Yeah.
operational. So the ARPA funds that are about to expire, are you confident that you're able to utilize these funds appropriately?
Absolutely. It's based off operating expenses, and that's kind of one of our lifelines to get through this fiscal year.
And is it considered an eligible expense according to ARPA?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Other questions? Do you have an apprenticeship program?
No, but I'm looking into it. I'm all for apprenticeship. I need, GRT needs certified mechanics. We need drivers, but yes, I'm looking into the apprenticeship for GRTA.
How many mechanics do you have on staff currently?
Currently, there's only 2, but they're considered automotive, and a lot of our buses are semi-heavy, right? And they're high technology. So even if we get mechanics, you need the proper tools for them to do their work, right? And so right now, that's where GRTA is at. We don't have the tools and the proper disciplines to really repair our buses.
What amount of money do you need to operate because I know the budget here it only mentions 2.7 million, but then your federal grants are, they're not necessarily stable. What is a good budget for GRTA?
So right now, with full staff and all our object codes with the amounts we have to it, about 4.5 million.
Okay, that's operational, 4.5 million just to operate.
I'm sorry, for full operations
Full
to
operation,
include contracts, all that. 3.3 for salaries.
Okay, what about reserves? So like, replacing the fleet. I mean, do you segregate a budget for that? So capital.
We've relied on capital improvement funding through the FTA through that.
But you don't plan for that? Then what is your projected budget for that? Because, generally every utility has, to plan for that, they would have a set-aside budget for that.
Yeah, so I would like the 5-year replacement, and then also we're looking into electrical. So we would like a reserve, and based on a government estimate, we're looking at 6.5, and that's for 15 units. So, in nationwide, electric school buses are cheaper back there, but of course we're so far away. Of course, there's an increase in inflation on getting those buses in, electric school buses. So 6.5.
Okay. And then what other expenses would you have to plan for?
Yeah, we would have to look into charging station and technology, right? Because there may be some issues mechanically, and so we have to improve that area for the mechanical side. So just for the assets, I would believe it's 6.5, and then with his operational salaries and stuff, 4.5.
Okay. All right. I think those are my questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Perez. At this time, I'd like to dismiss the panel, but please just stay in the building and nearby in case the two of us have any additional questions for you. And then at this time, I'd also like to call up the people who have signed up to testify, Mrs. Evelyn and Miss Ginger Porter. Please come on up. Well, all right, and where? All right. Ma'am, go ahead and please state your name for the record and feel free to give your testimony.
I'm Ginger Porter. I am a member of the public. I've been a past board member, and I've spent many years looking at transit systems while I worked at Guam Cedars. In particular, in regards to compliance with ADA and making sure that the system was accessible to individuals with disabilities. Unfortunately, we've had a round robin of administration in GRTA. And when I sit and listen to the comments, I can tell that that is the case. There are a couple things that I think they're not well equipped with information that they need to know. And in some of those areas, I've made notes to provide information to you based on my knowledge. In regards to the question of, do we have sufficient service to provide for people who are using paratransit service? I do not ride the service, but many of my former students do, and I hear from them individually, and many of them call me. One such passenger said, I tried to get a ride and I can't get it. And I said, well, when did you call? I called 2 weeks in advance. And of course, we used to have just 2 days in advance. And it's guaranteed 1 day in advance. So we're not meeting that threshold. And it's unfortunate. A lot of it has to do with equipment, but it also has to do with the people who are remaining in transit, who have an understanding of what needs to be delivered. So, do we have sufficient service? No. Are there ride denials that are over the top? I would say yes, but a lot of them are not captured because I know of people who have given up on transit. They've stopped becoming our riders. And I think that's really unfortunate. So there's a lot of beefing up that needs to be done in GRTA, which I recommend remain as GRTA. It's very specific information and guidelines from the federal government. And people need to understand that in order to make it operational. The question was, I was concerned that one of the responses, and it was a very prominent response, was the fact that they are prioritizing rides. FTA is very, very clear that of your eligible riders, everybody has the right to the ride. You cannot prioritize based on whether somebody's going to a medical appointment or they're going to visit their auntie. It just cannot be done. And I suspected that it was being done. And today was confirmation that yes, it is being done. For certain trips, there is prioritization. It should be first come, first serve. And that because you cannot tell how important is one rider's choice of going someplace over another rider's choice. Do they have food in their house? Is medical more important than shopping for groceries? You don't know what their needs are, and you can't ask what their needs are. So, following the guideline, every person has the right to a next day ride. GRTA is not providing that. And it's not just because of the 2 people who were in here earlier. It goes back farther. So they've been put in a position of where they can't really be fully successful. The question was posed, are riders getting a next day ride? And the answer was yes. I don't believe that to be accurate. In talking to people who are trying to get rides, they're having trouble making rides 14 days in advance, let alone 1 day that is a civil right. I sat with a team who did the assessment of how GRTA is managing in regards to accessibility. And that was a team that was sent out to see if we were operating. It was in 2015. My home office is still full of all of that information. And I assisted the transit authority at that time, not in making the decisions, but in helping write up the responses to the investigation team. So I'm very, very familiar with what the pluses and minuses are. And they still exist. Are we meeting the ADA compliance? No, we are not. In some areas, perhaps. But overall, we still have a lot of issues to address. In regards to the training, the past training that is at GCC, I created the curriculum and provided it to them. I wrote it based on my certification as a PASS trainer. And with that curriculum, at the bottom of it, it certifies that in order to deliver it, you need to order your materials and your testing materials from Community Transportation Association of America, who developed the training. I have no assurance that that has been done, and I believe it to be a problem. In order for someone to be trained to proficiency, which is a requirement of FTA, they not only have to have word knowledge, they need to have hands-on practical knowledge, and they need to be tested on that. I have seen several photographs of persons who have been secured on transit bus, and it was a dangerous securement. The training from CTAA in PASS, Passenger Assistance, Sensitivity, and Safety and Training, they've changed the name a little bit, but when you're doing hands-on and you're securing someone, it's just like when you get into your pickup or into your car and you do a 3-point securement. It comes over your shoulder and you hook it up next to the bony part of your body, around your pelvic bone. That connection should not be in the middle of someone's chest. That's dangerous. It should not be around a soft part of the body. That's dangerous. And I have seen evidence that that is the way some of the securements have been done. Now, whether that is a matter of not being trained properly, or is it a matter that the schedules are so tight, drivers are taking shortcuts, that's unknown. But what is known, that it is occurring, okay? So in regards to PASS, I have concerns, and I probably should go check with GCC to make sure that they are following all of the requirements that I placed into that curriculum. If not, as a certified PASS trainer, I will be contacting CTAA and let them know that their curriculum is not being delivered properly or has been abused. Because they're the ones who put it together. I believe that they have the right to retain that information and not be used unless you're ordering their testing materials and conducting their tests and doing national certification. So those are some of the concerns that I had listed. I guess it's so cold in here, it was hard for me to write notes. So I don't have all of the notes. Is our transit authority funded appropriately? No, it is not. They're correct in saying they need an infusion of funds. Are they staffed appropriately? They're staffed, but is it appropriate? In my opinion, there are too many people that occupy the same customer service designation. In transit, you should be certifying your dispatchers. They need specific training. That's different than customer service. You should be certifying your people who are doing the scheduling. And of course, this is all in regards to the paratransit operations. So there needs to be a good job before you start funding positions is to write up position descriptions that are appropriate to transit. That's different than school bus driver positions. You have a different population, you have different needs, a lot of more flexibility of instances that you're going to be dealing with. So I could probably sit and write a lot more, but from what I heard today, it's time to get aboard. It's time to put an ad in the paper and to really recruit members for the board. And thank you, Senator Perez, that you brought up how the board is selected. And it was clear to me that people who have been the leadership of GRTA recently don't have a full understanding of that. And it's because they've been there for what, 3 months, 4 months? And the people before them, 3 months, 4 months, and the people before them, 3 months, 4 months. You can't run an agency without depth of knowledge. And you must have knowledgeable leadership, okay? And that leadership needs to have their team. And I think so much of that is missing in GRTA, and I think it's a shame. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Evelyn, please go ahead and state your name for the record, and feel free to give your testimony at your leisure, ma'am.
Hafide, Chairperson William Parkinson and Senator Serena Perez. Thank you for finally holding an oversight hearing, although I would like to share a bit of a situation here. I'm the only one that is here who uses public transportation. There wasn't much awareness to the public about this oversight hearing, and I don't think it's fair that not many of them are here, because most of them are affected by this. But interestingly, first of all, my name is Evelyn Duenas. I apologize for that. I've been a writer since 1982 with the Guam Mass Transit Authority at the time. And as Ms. Ginger echoed earlier, there are some questions that I could possibly answer that they weren't able to answer. One of them is the budget for GRTA. This is the smallest it's ever gotten. When it was the Guam Mass Transit Authority, it was holding a fiscal year budget of 3.9 million, sometimes more. But it never drops this low. So I did know already that having that type of budget would not carry the agency ahead. It'll cause a lot of problems. On another note, as some of them mentioned earlier, do they respond to complaints? No. They don't respond to complaints as timely as they should, because of the lack of manpower, the lack of awareness of how transportation is supposed to be delivered. And as Ginger said earlier, knowledge. For the past months, we've had 3 different people. The 2 men that were there were familiar with Guam Mass Transit because they were with the agency before. The current interim executive manager, which is Linda Ibanez, and her predecessor before then, they're fairly new to the agency. So I applaud them for trying their very best to do, but I surely see from my standpoint that they needed support as well as technical assistance on the agency. And they were just thrown into a position that they are unaware of or not even familiar with. Surprisingly, they mentioned all of this. Currently, I have in front of me a observation that occurred on January 2020, January 14, 2022, that is still ongoing. I'm just gonna, well, I'll just read the whole thing and go down the bullet points. On Thursday, January 13th, I called for reservation change for the following day, and I was told that the schedule was fully booked. I was advised to call Friday, January 14th to see if there was an availability. On Friday, I called at 8 a.m. and was told by dispatch that I was canceling two rides scheduled for district canceled due to the office closure. Again, shopping center was an advocate. I was to meet with the individual with district appointment. I asked to go to ITC instead, sorry about that, sorry about that. Willingly, I chose to take fixed route and was dropped because I was denied with the pickup at home at 10:50 a.m. I finished at one museum at 11:10 and was picked up at the scheduled time of 12:25 p.m. The next driver pickup was in Sananya for a drop-off at Reno Care in Sananya. I advised the dispatch that I was willing to be dropped last since the request drop at ITC was the return to compound. Still denied. I decided to take fixed route from the Agana ITC. Here is what I observed. There is no restroom for the drivers or passengers at the Agana hub. Drivers and passengers are using the booney that the waiting area, and two shelters are not clean, which continues to carry, and smells of urine. Number 2, PowerPoint. The Agana hub, I observed a gray line, inaccessible 9-passenger van with a government license plate. The GRTA signage on the passenger door, it had a small signage for green line. It did not display proper signage in font size, nor in a placement at the boarding side. I observed while inaccessible passenger van leased from Triple J Motors for GRTA to operation. Assigned to orange line, it did not display proper signage in the front, nor in placement on the boarding side. PowerPoint 4, only one of 3 GRTA vehicles was accessible at the hub, and those still currently continue to happen. How many other inaccessible vehicles were on other routes? Southern routes, at a minimum, I estimated 3 of 9 vehicles on route were inaccessible. That does not meet the ADA standards of accessibility set by FDA. PowerPoint bullet number 4, I took Blue Line from Hagåtña to the Muning GCIC building. Upon arriving, fixed route, I found no accessible path to the accessible entrance. I had the choice of taking my scooter on the road at the main intersection or trying to use the parking lot ramp on the south side of the building, which was gated and closed. My attempt at the later choice resulted in an uneven path where my scooter tilted towards the down slope and was afraid I would tip over. Fire rescue arrived from the street, and escorted me around the building to an accessible entrance. So long story short, the ride denied requested a day prior resulted in my attempt to use fixed route, much of which was inaccessible, and as I found out, the destination had no accessible path. The accessible entrance, this placed me in trouble and failed to provide access to my requested destination. A simple customer service accommodation would have prevented this situation. I observed the driver were providing their own personal protection and equipment, and a sanitizer. The only thing provided on the vehicle by GRTA was a broom for cleaning, and did not observe whether the first aid kit and blood-borne pathogen kit were completed. As per my observation as a rider, a new personnel have not received required training for passenger assistance and service. That include proper securement of my mobility device and occupants. There is an extreme shortage of drivers and vehicles. It appears only 9 vehicles are running, and that 1/3 of the operation fleet is inaccessible. That's still currently going on. I observed no practice of social distancing, that's during COVID time. And then the phone system, which records messages, contributes to reservation problems. Still ongoing. I checked fixed route schedule to see if paratransit was taking reservation for equal hours of operation. It is not until this very day. This is a federal requirement noted in GRTA's compliance review and state management review. The executive manager at the time quit. His office was on the first floor. The board secretary quit, and her office is as well on the first floor. Currently, those offices that are on the first floor are not currently being utilized. They had informed whenever a rider is to go to GRTA, where to call and make an appointment, only because their offices are non-ADA compliant. GRTA really is only supposed to be housed at DPW for 1 year, but they've been there for almost, 10 years? almost 10 years. And it's been a problematic thing. And as a matter of fact, their staffing got smaller to where they're not even able to almost do what they need to do on a daily basis. So these current problems still arise, and I do see that with the board, although I do recall that there are names that were sent to Adelup for the board, for them to do their part to restore the board. And that hasn't been done. I do have one person that is willing to be on the board since years ago, but again, her name is placed, but has not been brought to this legislature. Really, this agency has been placed in the back burner for quite some time already. And no one hasn't, picked it up to move it to a visible location. And with it being over at DPW, it's completely hidden. You can't, people don't even know that the agency exists, only the ones who use them. So this has been a problematic thing, and yes, they've been LTAs. Some of them have been LTAs already for 5 years. And that reason behind that, and I can answer to some of their questions that they couldn't answer, was because these positions were not included in the budget. And when the creation of Public Law 30-5 came into law, that law was supposed to literally bring back the staffing of the agency to its fullest, but the only one that returned back to Guam Regional Transit Authority was an ombudsman, a chief planner, and an AO. That's the only three that returned back to the agency when Public Law 30-5 came into law. And since then, it was just left hanging. The vehicles that are currently there, and they weren't able to give you the numbers of vehicles. As a matter of fact, they have a total of 26 to 27 vehicles at this present time. On 2019, late 2018, they procured 11 RBOCs and 11 MV1s. Those vehicles, majority RBOCs, they're no longer running. One was running but only had an issue of brakes. When they ordered the parts, which was only brakes, they could not put the brakes on because what they had done, they didn't even answer your question about cannibalizing. There is approximately 20 plus vehicles that were cannibalized. I give credit to Henry and the interim executive manager for trying their best to maneuver. But the reason why GRTA doesn't have no vehicles, it's not only because of improper maintenance, but also cannibalizing. So now, GRTA only has, I would say, four official vehicles used on fixed route that are non-ADA compliant. These are government officials. And there's about 7 to 8 vehicles on para transit that is ADA compliant. Some of them, the lifters have to be operated manually because they no longer operate on power due to lack of maintenance. As far as the air conditioning is concerned, the windows on the vehicles now are allowed to be open because they're all on the top. But there are some days where they cannot open the windows due to fumes going into the vehicle. That's the current problem of the current vehicles that they have. So really, they're only running between 7 to 8 accessible vehicles. The fixed route, which is supposed to have 6, is only running 4 with non-ADA compliance. Whenever there's a person needing an accessible vehicle on fixed route, they would have to borrow and divert 1 or 2 vehicles to the fixed route from para to assist. Can they utilize what they have currently to mitigate some of the problems? The answer is yes, they could. But because a lot of the issues that's currently happening, there's two to three individuals can literally run the agency to a proficient as possible, but because their positions as being LTAs, they're not able to step up on the plate and do that because they will be going against their leadership at GRTA. So technically speaking, decision makings with supervisors are not almost permitted at GRTA because of the LTA positions. And when they did the budget 3 years ago, at a 2.9 or 2.2, I too myself knew, I said, that's not even enough to cover operations, only administrative cost, not even that to be exact. So that's the delay of not having them classified into the position, not only because they don't have the proper training, but the funding is just not there. And are we aware? Is the administration aware? Yes, they are aware. And upon me being removed from the board, there was a process already to take care of the process of making the employees classified, but that did not move forward because there was other change of plans, which, to be perfectly honest, upon my removal on the board, GRTA just kept dwindling down to where it is now. And can we get through this now? Yes, we can, but we need people to work together to help that agency flare. And One of them is the administration to work along with the agency and to fund the agency appropriately and put the right leadership in there. And when I was the chairperson, prior to becoming a chair, the interim executive manager prior didn't have a board yet, but he was, because he already had people in line for the board and all they needed to do was to be confirmed. Did he go piece by piece in having things approved? Yes, piece by piece, but not utilizing over 5,000 plus. Can they do it again now? Yes, they can. But again, we don't have people in there that are well versed and familiar with the issues of the Guam Regional Transit Authority. We just keep our leaderships, our administration just continues to band-aid the system, and that is not what we need. And daily, as was mentioned earlier, there's quite a lot of individuals that are under the eligibility paratransit list or schedules that have been riders for many years, have been denied service and being told every day that the next availability is 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. So is it meeting the requirements, the standards, the needs of the community? No. Can it be done? Yes. Does it require money? Yes. Does it require equipment? Yes, it does. But truthfully, with the current equipment that they have, they can modify to fit all those people in. And the truth of the matter is, they're not being given dwell time, they're not being given travel time, and yes, the schedules are tight. There's one day where I had a schedule going from Agana Heights all the way to Dedado in 10 minutes. How do we work that? That's impossible. But they had to do it because that's what they were told to do. Should they do that? No. But the drivers have, all they have to do is follow the schedule that they're being given. And it's been problematic for years and many people. Can it be mitigated? Yes. Can it be done soon? Yes, if they put in the right stakeholders and do some modifications and adjustments with the current fleet that they have. So right now, they only have approximately 7 fleets that are 80, sometimes less. So are we continuing to struggle with this transportation? Yes. There's a drop fare on Friday. Will people with disabilities be able to get there? No, because they don't have the equipment to do so. And can those vehicles be resurrected? Some of them can, but they need to get a current contract running to put those vehicles back to breathing mode, because they're just not breathing. And it's sad because the 11R box, those are ram entry. Those are a lot easier to maneuver. And the current fleet of buses, some of them can run, but the reason why some of them are not running is because they're operated by lifts, and the drivers have difficulty running that manually. because they have to what's the correct word? Pump manually the lifter up. And so that's strenuous on the driver. And the capacity of the lift, weight-wise, I believe is 800. And if that 800 and my weight, which is 120, 130, that's 930 pounds. So imagine if you're lifting an obese rider. So that's an additional. So that's strenuous on the driver's arm and back. There's a lifter that's currently operating that needs hydraulic fluid. When it goes up or down, it makes the loudest noise it can make because it's dry. Can they even do that? No. So, and just to be exact, we have vehicles where the drivers have to open the door from the outside to get out and close the door from the inside to secure the door because it's missing a handle, the lock is broken. So there's a lot of safety issues that are small that could be rectified, but they just don't have the maintenance to do so. And prior to me leaving the board, I think we made a contract with Atkins Scroll for them to maintain the equipment, and they're to put in 100,000 into the coffer for them to be able to maintain the vehicles. That only ran for a good 3 months. So after that, everything just collapsed with the maintenance and repairs of the equipment. So now the equipments are really bad. There's a new vehicle, and I'll send it to your staff, Senator or Chair Parkinson. One of the buses are covered with plywood in the inside because it already has holes. And these are one of the buses that just came in a year ago, or not even 6 months ago. It already has sinking floor. So are they still running that? Yes. Is it a safety issue? Yes. Who spent for that? It wasn't the agency that spent for that. It was the driver, because he took it into his hands for safety purposes. Was the agency able to purchase a plywood? Yes, with their discretionary funds, which is the fair money. The other thing that they're doing over there that's inappropriate is after the day and they go into shift change, they have the drivers counting their fare money with the dispatcher. That is a no-no. That should be the driver and a supervisor and the manager of the agency. That's part of the regulations of GRTA. So these are all the factors that are ongoing and just not helping the agency much. And do we have a reliable agency? The answer is no. And every day I tell myself, my gosh, the agency is more disabled than me. Because it really is. We have, she gets calls, I get calls like from 4 or 5 different people saying, I cannot get a ride. And question is why? because we don't have the fleet to assist with the services. So for them to not be able to answer some of the questions, that's why I was just like, that's, but at least they're trying, but it really needs to move to better service, because GRTA is an important part of everyone's life, not just, And again, I'm the only one here. There are many people that are out there that are being affected by this, but because they weren't aware of this public hearing, they're not here. So maybe my suggestion is, if there's another hearing to creep around, then inform GRTA to put a flyer on the bus saying there's a hearing on this day. For those of you that are interested, call ahead and make a schedule, or, But that wasn't done in this round. That's why I'm the only one here. Is that appropriate? No. So hopefully another hearing down the line, there's more people in here, because everyone is affected by it. And since COVID, GRTA had a lot of funding, and then into the storm, it also had funding. It had a lot on the CARES Act, but it didn't do much there. They were supposed to bring in 10, 20 buses 2 years ago. That didn't happen because something else erupted. So, is this agency difficult to run? No. If they put in the right stakeholders, it'll float. And I'm going to share some of this. Because this is where my passion is. If this government or this administration allows me to go in there and work with the operations, can some of the problems be resolved? Yes. Can it be done overnight? No. But maybe after 3 weeks you can see changes, especially on the fleet. Because that's where my passion is. That's where I'm familiar with. Just 2 weeks ago, the lifter didn't want to operate on the bus that I was on. And the driver said, "We got to call the mechanic." I said, "No, we're going to stay here for an hour and a half. Come and I'll guide you." So I showed him. I didn't touch anything. I just guided him. I said, "Follow this." And so he said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Deploy the lift and bring it back up." When he did that, it was able to operate. And it's only because it's not properly maintained. And there wasn't hydraulic oil on the lift. That's why I, for one, even the drivers we prefer ramp over lift, because it's easy to exit, easy to enter. What's that word, Jench? Can you help me remember the word of? It's more, not just easier, but it's less time consuming. The ramp goes in and out, and that's it. The lifter, we have to go from ground up. That's time consuming. And so did we choose to have ramp entry? Yes. It's a lot easier on inclement weathers easy for the driver, easy for riders. It's just exit in, exit out. The lift, we have to go on it, go up, go down. And for me, I would rather use a ramp than use a lift already because of my past experience. But these people at GRTA, there's about 2, 3 of them that have been there for more than 5 years, even when transit was subcontracted. And they're pretty knowledgeable as to how to operate the system and to bring it to the best that they can. But if they have a lot of pressure from the top telling them no, it's difficult to do so. So we really have to put the proper person in there to lead the agency to where it should be, and who is empathetic to run the agency and sincere to run the agency. But all they've been doing is band-aiding, and that didn't get us anywhere. It just made it more difficult. So is there room to improve? Yes, there is. So that's my testimony, and I'm going to give a copy to your staff in regards to right denials and cancellation of service. That's still ongoing as well. And the percentage is not small, but pretty big. So that's all I have for now, and hopefully we can mitigate this problem and run GRTA to a proficient service.
Thank you, ladies, for your testimony. I have a couple questions regarding prioritization of rides I'd just like to clarify. You said, I heard testimony that prioritization of rides was something that you had heard was happening. And we heard that in their testimony. Have either of you personally experienced rides being prioritized or deprioritized based on the type of event the ride was going to?
The reference I gave was what came from from Henry, yes. And so he did state that there was prioritization.
Yeah.
Specifically, I cannot provide that information. I don't have access to it.
Sure, go ahead, ma'am.
If I may, after the storm that we just had, the system was prioritized. They only scheduled dialysis riders. There weren't any other riders who are going shopping, who are going. So do they prioritize? Yes, they do.
Okay. And then I have just another question for you, ladies. As you heard testimony, it's awfully hard to get members to want to work on this board. And, you know, I'm inspired by your passion and your commitment to getting the best out of the Guam Mass Transit. And so would you two be willing to serve on the board? Because if you would be willing to serve on the board, I would happily throw your name in as a nomination to whoever we have to make it to.
Hello.
I would rather act in another capacity. I would rather act in a capacity to help the leadership, or to be in leadership, or to provide technical assistance, and that may be in conflict with being a board member. That would have to be determined.
Would you be willing to be on the GRTA board?
Well, No, I don't want to be on the board because the way I was removed from this administration. So the answer to that is I would rather work and try to help the agency than to be on the board and be micromanaged again.
All right. Thank you for that, ladies. I'd like to
The
open up
legislature.
the floor to my colleagues, Senators Sabina and Perez, if you have any questions for these ladies.
No, I guess no questions at this time, but I do appreciate, I mean, you highlighted some very serious concerns, but I think that is, opportunity to have a corrective action plan in place. I think what's really critically important is that we need to get a board, a working board, to get the administrator and then just, really working our way through these problems. And I'm willing to work with the chair here to ensure that we ensure progress. I feel that we should have a timeline for a board of directors to be, confirmed. I mean, we're running against the budget, so this has to happen fairly quickly. We only have one session, I believe, before we hit the budget season. So we really need to have these nominees come before us for a hearing. Or I believe there's some that need a hearing and some that don't necessarily. So this is really critical at this time.
I have a suggestion, if I may, because it has this board selection is taking a while. There is a section on the where the speaker for now can, work on that and put a board together because it's a long waiting already. And really to work in selecting the executive manager as soon as possible as well because it's been long waiting already. This is the longest the agency didn't have a board and didn't have a board meeting, and it's really hindering the service. So can it be done quickly? Yes, it can. So can I suggest that the legislature currently utilizes that approach because they were names sent up to the governor's office a year ago, even to be exact, and nothing was done. So can we take that that approach on the speaker selecting the board and putting a executive manager in the agency that would move the agency quicker? Because it's really, there's no leadership over there. There's no support. There's no morale, to be honest, over there, that agency. Everybody's to each his own. So can this body do something expeditiously to resolve this situation? Because it's been neglected, been ignored for a while already. So can this body move that agency forward? And I plead for that to happen because we, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, there might be only 2 vehicles, or let alone none. So can it be done? That's the best way to do at this point.
If I may,
Go ahead, ma'am.
I'd like to speak in regards to my experience on the board, which I found I learned a lot, okay? I enjoyed it. It doesn't have to be difficult. And this past summer, I ran across training for board members that addresses 4 areas which, when a board is constituted, they should go through that training. And some of it is looking at the future. In other words, how do you build the capacity within the board to be able to act as it should act and be knowledgeable? And that the ethics training isn't sufficient. There is training that is very specific to transit boards and those that operate efficiently and effectively. So to those people who might be interested, it is a very interesting experience. It opens up your mind. You get educated about many things, and you do the community a great service. So I appeal to people who are interested to bring their names forward. It is the experience of the past board. They had many mistakes, and it's put them in difficulty. But when I was on the board, we did not have that. So that they have to look past some of the errors that have been made by board members and understand that they can contribute and they can make good decisions for the benefit of the community. And it can be an enjoyable experience. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Senator Perez, do you have any other questions for these ladies?
No, but thank you for that suggestion. As you were speaking, I was thinking maybe we can host an orientation so for the community to attend and provide that sort of training, perhaps, and outreach. So I'm willing to work with the chair here, Senator Masi.
Yes, and we will speak with the speaker about filling those board positions if we have the authority to do so, if the speaker has the authority to do so. At this time, we will dismiss you two ladies, and we'll bring in GRTA briefly just for some oversight questions and to close it out. Thank you, ladies, for your testimony. Hello, folks. Welcome back. Thank you for sticking around. So I just had a few follow-up questions based on community input. We're kind of running up against time here, so I'll definitely keep it brief. I just wanted to get some clarification of prioritization of rides. Is this a first come, first served basis, or are we prioritizing certain events over others?
It's a first come, first serve, and I think I misspoke when we were talking about the cap for the 175, and then those onesies and twosies after that. What I meant to say was, you know, in terms of if we're able to bust that cap, we do look at it, you know, is it a renal? That's what I meant in terms of prioritizing riders, but it's a first come, first serve.
I see. And during the recovery during Mawar, did you find yourself in circumstances where you had to prioritize certain riders over others?
Not that I know of at this time.
I'm not aware.
And I guess the other thing I have a question about is just the funding question as we're going into budget season. You know, we were talking about this huge delta of about 37 million from, you know, what we have here versus what a similar sized island is using. You know, I know we're not going to cross that delta in a single budget season, but maybe we offices could work together and think of a long-term plan so we could gradually get that budget appropriation up over the years, but I think we need to look at that as a long-term budget problem because, you know, 2.7 million versus 39 million, that's just a huge gap. Even if we were to give you the money tomorrow, you know, that would be a huge organizational load for you to spend that money effectively. And so I would like to work with you to see how we can slowly ramp up your needs over the years. And I also understand that there's a problem of rotating leadership and the lack of people up on the board. So, we will reach out to the Speaker's office and see if we could use that as a way to alleviate some of the board requirements. Senator Perez, do you have any follow-up questions for this panel?
Yes, so acting administrator, so you've been the administrator since December, is that correct?
If I recall, yeah, I
Okay.
believe so.
And are you currently being paid by GRTA?
No, it's just collateral duties.
Collateral duties, okay. And how is it that you are to act without action of the board?
So basically, I'm just interim. What I do is just do the daily operations, then appropriate funding, provide guidance, decision-making, but everything else is like a line agency. It's certifying funds on the appropriation allotted schedule, but anything for prior year obligations, grants, we still need the board's approval. But the operational side of the appropriation, I believe that I'm able to move forward with that and just run the daily operations.
Okay. And so some of the things that were stated earlier by the community members, Ms. Evelyn, she stated that the money's counted by the bus drivers with the dispatchers. What is your reaction to that?
So that was brought up to my attention. It's an administrative support that is provided through a lockbox, I believe. So I'm doing corrective measures on that. When the bus driver receives the funding, we should have a lock. There's a package called a lockbox, and they would drop it in. So before I went to my conference, I asked the administrative support to provide that security purpose. So we're working on the procedure for that, but there is a lockbox for that.
So are there any concerns that money may be lost in that process?
Not as I'm aware of. The problem that they have is the funding when they receive that, it's really not US dollars or anything, it's tokens, fake money. So that's where we have the issue with when they do the accountability of the funds.
Okay. And in regards to certification, so one of the community members earlier, she mentioned that there really has to be more professionalism as far as training goes. So like dispatchers, there's specific training for their certification. Customer assistance also has their specific certification for a regional transportation. Are you aware of this?
So yes, there's it's called the precision description, and it is allowed by DOA. So there's a mechanism for position description for dispatcher, customer service, and schedulers.
Okay, and so can you take any action now regarding these PDQs at this point in time, or do we have to wait for a board?
So we have those positions currently on our budget. Of course, announcement, and it's based on funding, right? So the staffing, I believe, there's a dispatcher and a scheduler, yes, on board. And so we would like to increase our support staff on that. And so once we secure the funding, then we'll go out for classified positions.
Okay. So of all the issues that were raised today, how would you develop a plan, a corrective action plan going forward?
So, of course, I'll go back. There is a lot of work that's ahead of GRTA, but really they need to solidify the board members and a permanent executive manager to solidify GRTA to move forward.
Okay, so thank you for filling this vacancy. I know this is a tough position to be in, but we definitely need to respond appropriately. So we're willing to work expeditiously. what would you recommend as a timeline to get this all done? So the board of directors confirmed, executive administrator, what timeline would you give so that we can respond properly?
I believe it all hinges on the board. We can't, we can't control when they're gonna be able to form quorum, but I believe after that, it's gonna be a pretty quick process in terms of profiling executive managers, hiring, and then that executive manager will have a vision and get purpose, motivation, and direction from the board. And in that time, I think it's going to fall into place. But it all hinges on having a board, and that's not hyperbole. That's fact.
Okay, Ms. Abanez, what timeline would you give yourself to have a working board of directors? So starting from today.
I wish it was as soon as possible.
Okay, so
But,
what can we hold you to?
Uh,
We're trying to get the board.
Can we say 6 months? And the reason why is because there's dialogues, there's requirements, there's discussion, right? And so, yeah, 6 months if we have an active participation. Who would like to serve as a board for the members?
Okay, so that means we're going to lose out on federal funding.
Well, like I said, we're working with our FTA grantors to carry over those things, but if we can get as soon as we can, but I think there is a lot of discipline and requirements to be a board member. But we can start the dialogue, and I'll reach out to my bosses.
Okay. Yeah, I think that seems to be a little bit too liberal, considering that, this issue is not getting any better, and that, there are federal funds that are not going to be potentially extended. We're talking about ARPA funds, so I believe there is a hard deadline on those.
Well, the ARPA funds, I believe, we have exhausted. It's just our federal grants. That.
Yeah, okay, well, I appreciate your responses, but I do, I wish that we can work more expeditiously than 6 months. 6 months is too long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as soon as I work on it, I'll keep you guys posted.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for answering our follow-up questions. As always, if there's anything we could do to help expedite the search for board members, please let us know. And, as the chair, I would be happy to help in any way I can.
Okay. Thank you.
I know we are kind of over time a little bit. We only have this room till 5 o'clock, and it's 5:10, so we're going to have to wrap up this public hearing. So if there are no further questions or comments, this will conclude our discussion on this oversight hearing. I will waive my close, and my office will continue to accept written testimony on today's hearing within 5 business days from today, which will be mailed to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores Street, Suite 905 of the DNA building in Nagotnia. You may also send your written testimony to my office via email, senatorparkinson@guamlegislature.org. Thank you all for your participation. This oversight hearing of GRTA is adjourned, and the time is now 5:10.